Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Tax Talk, broadcast by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. My name is Jordan Bateman, and I'm the British Columbia Director of the CTF, joined as always by our Alberta Director, Paige McPherson. Paige, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. A little bummed it started snowing here today. It was 14 degrees yesterday, but I guess that's Calgary for you.
That is Calgary for you. I can report that here in British Columbia in the Lower Mainland, of the 31 days in October, we have had or are projected to have rain on 27 of them.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I don't know what's worse. I can't decide.
Yeah, the sun comes out for like 3 minutes and everyone is rubbing their eyes and running outside and can't believe it. So in that kind of month. Paige and I are joined today by our Ontario Director, Christine Van Geyn, the incomparable CVG, who will bring us up to date on her work fighting Ontario's skyrocketing hydro rates. CVG, how are you?
I'm good. It snowed here too last night. So you're the one who's left out. I like it though.
Almost a pan-Canadian snowstorm, as Justin Trudeau would say. Well, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization dedicated to just three things: lower taxes, less waste, and more government accountability. That's what drives all of the communications, research, and advocacy work we do. Lots of ways for everyone to connect with us. You can tweet us at Jordan Bateman, at Paige McPhee, or at C Van Geyn. And be sure to visit the website at taxpayer.com to see what we're working on. You can also email me at bcdirector@taxpayer.com or engage on our Facebook page, facebook.com/taxpayer.com. All right, enough of that stuff. What's happening with you guys? What's new with you, Paige?
So what's new here in Alberta is, I'll talk about a news release that we put out this week about beer taxes. So the Alberta government, as you may remember, raised beer taxes. They used to have a graduated markup scheme, it was called. So the smaller the brewer you were, the lower your tax was. Medium-sized brewers were in the middle, big at the top. And at the top, it was only like Molson, Coors, Labatt, Sleeman, like the really big guys. And what ended up happening is the Alberta government hiked beer taxes for all brewers, all up to that big guy rate, like Molson, Coors. So even the littlest brewers had to pay that rate of tax, but then decided to give corporate welfare to some local breweries in Alberta, the small ones. So what this effectively did is the small brewers from out of province, if you like to drink, craft beer from Yukon or Saskatchewan or BC or really anywhere else in the world, now the taxes were so much higher, so prices started increasing. Several small breweries from out of province are suing the Alberta government, taking the government to court. One, Muskoka Brewery in Ontario, has pulled their beers off the shelves. It's been really a disastrous beer policy, but we were leaked some emails, internal emails from Molson Coors and Labatt, and showing that they both hiked their prices basically right after the Alberta government raised beer taxes. But their taxes weren't raised. They were at that same high rate the whole time. But the Alberta government, in doing this, essentially opened the door for these beer companies to now be able to hike their prices on their discount beers specifically without losing their competitive edge. Because all of their competitors who make discount beers or any other type of beer now have to pay higher taxes, so their prices have gone up. So now the big beer companies can do the same. The email that we got from Molson Coors is pretty explicit about the tax hike happened. It gave us the opportunity to do this. The Labatt email, not as explicit in terms of referencing the tax hike, but still talking about how they raised prices. So now this twisted outcome, right, of this policy, the Alberta government thinks that they're helping small breweries, and instead what they're doing is allowing these big foreign-owned beer corporations to hike their prices and just to increase their profits. It's a total lose-lose for consumers in Alberta.
Jeez, you can't mess with beer anywhere in Canada, let alone Alberta. So what's been the feedback from the last couple of days?
Well, people are pretty, I think that there's some anger towards the companies and there's some anger towards the government in doing this. The bad part of this is that as a consumer, it doesn't matter whether you like neat craft beers, brewed in microbreweries, or if you like the cheapest discount beers from the biggest beer companies. No matter what, your prices have gone up unless you specifically drink one of the small local beers that are getting subsidized by the Alberta government, in which case perhaps your prices haven't gone up, I don't know. So people are pretty mad about it. I would say that now in Alberta, given the economic conditions, given the unemployment, probably people really need a cold one more than usual. So they're not happy about this. And hopefully that this is what I'm hoping that comes out of this. The Alberta government probably had good intentions with this policy, and I'm hoping that they can see that there's some twisted outcomes of policies when you mess with taxes. So hopefully they reverse it.
Yeah, Paige, I feel like every week we talk about another stupid decision by the Alberta NDP government and, another unintended consequence from a bad tax. Is this starting to weigh on them? I mean, eventually there's a straw that breaks the camel's back, right? Are they just taking so many arrows now that they're bleeding out, or what's going on there?
Well, certainly in terms of their popularity, it's funny. There was a poll that came out recently showing that Premier Notley is quite popular across Canada and certain parts of Canada, but not popular in Alberta. And maybe that's because some of her policy, well, I don't know. Clearly the policies are not panning out perhaps how they planned in Alberta, or maybe this was their intention. I'm not quite sure. I think give them the benefit of the doubt. They are a rookie government. A lot of their MLAs and ministers are rookies, so maybe they're just figuring things out. Maybe when they do policies like this, they genuinely think they're really helping small breweries. But instead, they're giving these big corporations the ability to just increase their profits. Perhaps that they didn't realize that was going to be an unintended outcome, although we warned about it, as did many other groups. I don't know. I mean, I think certainly the polls reflect that bad policy after bad policy, specifically tax hike after tax hike, are really grating on Albertans at a time when the economy is not doing well. Albertans, prior to this, I mean, a lot of people did have a lot of extra money lying around. Not really the case now. So I think it's going to prove to be a problem.
Yeah. Well, beer policy in governments, right? In BC, the BC Liberals use it to deflect from any bad news that ever happens. It's a well-known thing that if they're in a bad news cycle, they'll reform liquor policy ever so slightly to open something up, and we'll have a news conference and news release. You can almost set your clock by it. It's become a running joke with the media. It's another reason why government needs to have less control over liquor and just tax it and get out of the business altogether. So.
Well, isn't that what happened in Ontario, Christine? I know that the Ontario government sort of freed up the liquor market a little bit. Was that during perhaps a bad news time?
It's always a bad news time here in Ontario. But it's funny that you mentioned that, Jordan. It's the bad news kind of distraction, because we had a press conference at a grocery store today. Not me, but the Ontario government had a press conference at a grocery store today to announce another change to some liquor policy.
That's funny.
It's just whenever there's a bad news story, just kind of try to distract from it with some beer and wine.
You gotta love the playbook. You gotta love the playbook. What's new with you, Christine?
So one of the new developments here in Ontario this week is the reintroduction of legislation in Ontario related to election finance reform. So I don't know who has been following this story. It's a pet issue of mine. In Ontario, it was revealed by a couple different newspapers that cabinet ministers had $500,000 fundraising goals. They were having $10,000 a ticket dinners to hobnob with cabinet ministers. It was on really important kind of issues as well. These dinners were held for the bankers who were involved in the privatization of Hydro One, and the energy minister who was in charge of selecting who the underwriters would be and who the bankers would be. So some pretty pay to play kind of implications with that. The public was frankly outraged. So the government last session introduced legislation that would remove all donations from corporate and unions and replace it with taxpayer-funded subsidies to political parties. They prorogued Parliament. This week they reintroduced the legislation. We've taken issue with a lot of that legislation, in particular the $10 to $15 million that is going to be going to political parties. So when you have your roads and bridges that are falling apart, when you have therapy for children with autism being canceled, when the Minister of Health is essentially going to war with doctors over salary issues in this province, and they're closing schools, probably the last thing on taxpayers' list of priorities that they think their money should be spent on is money to political parties. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're seeing here in Ontario. Another problem with the legislation is that the government is banning not just the $10,000 a plate dinners for cabinet ministers. They're also banning $100 a ticket corn roasts for your local MPP. So the typical fundraiser for, you know, a rural MPP who wants to have their corn roast, their annual corn roast, to raise some money for their riding association, they can no longer attend that. You know, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy for politicians most of the time. This, I think, is nonsense, and I think it's doubly nonsense because instead of voluntary small donations for things like community events, the government is going to be making us pay for them involuntarily. So really problematic legislation.
It's funny because usually Alberta has been following Ontario's footsteps on some of this horrible green corporate welfare and climate policy, and now it seems like Ontario is following Alberta's footsteps because the Alberta government, or maybe they're happening around the same time, the Alberta government's doing the same thing. It's just ridiculous. Is
the Alberta government banning local MLAs from participating in local fundraisers that are ticketed?
I don't think so. Because we didn't have the same move. Yeah. I mean, we didn't have the same scandal with obviously with donations and all the hobnobbing with the elites. So I don't think that there's anything like that, but they have already banned corporate and union donations, and now they're probably going to introduce a subsidy to taxpayer or to political parties, which I agree with you is the absolute last thing that I would prioritize in terms of spending taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, aren't the Ontario Liberals, though, in the dying days before this legislation coming in, aren't they like paying to play everywhere? I mean, there's ridiculous dinners, and they're just trying to shovel as much money in the coffers as possible. And then the party's still running a massive debt, aren't they? Like a couple million, did I read? 4 million?
The provincial Liberals?
Yeah, the provincial Liberal Party itself have a debt.
Of how much money the parties have individually. I think the three PCs have a large debt. I'm not sure about the other parties. Yeah, I mean, I have signed up for mailing lists for all the parties, so just so I know what they're up to. And I've been inundated with invitations to these fundraisers in the last days where it's available to them. But the problem that a lot of people had with the $10,000 a ticket fundraiser was not just that it was $10,000 a ticket, it was that they were invitation only. So they were not publicly advertised. They were kind of these secret invitations, these secret dinners. And I think it's one thing to have them. I'm not necessarily against corporate union donations to political parties. I think a lot of people take issue with it. But if the government doesn't want to pay the political consequences of having extremely expensive pay-to-play access to their cabinet ministers, the solution isn't to ban those fundraisers and then turn around and tell the public that it's now our responsibility to pay for them. Like that is, to me, what is the most egregious part of this legislation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and generally the CTF's position on this has been, we don't really care who gives money or how much money, just tell us before we go into the ballot box to vote. And that would be probably the biggest electoral finance reform that we'd like to see. Proactive disclosure. Maybe you have a blackout period where people can't give money in the last week in an election. Scott Hennig always makes the example, look, if David Duke gave $500 to a local candidate, you don't care if that's $500 or $5,000 or $5. You want to know that it was David Duke who gave it, so you can ask questions of that candidate, but you wouldn't know until after the election. So proactive disclosure, definitely.
And make the donations voluntary.
Yeah.
Involuntary, compulsory donations to political parties by taxpayers who don't support those parties is an egregious kind of piece of policy.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, my what's new.
Yeah, what's new with you?
My what's new is the Canadian Senate has 9 new appointees. Sadly, Tristan Hopper from the National Post, who made a very public appeal to be appointed, did not get appointed, so he will not be able to champion the cause of wacky taxpayers there in the upper chamber. But as I read through the list, I can't help but notice that of these 9, I think 7 have spent considerable time in their careers being paid by taxpayers, government workers, things like that. Seems to me the best way to get into the Senate, work for government previously. So I don't know what that means for those of us in the private sector still hoping to make it in.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So I guess that means that if we had gotten Porky the pig, the taxpayer mascot, to apply to be a senator, wouldn't have worked out too well because he hasn't been in the taxpayer trough.
We'd have to fake some sort of university tenure for him position or something like that to try to sneak him across the line. But look, I'm sure all these people are very reasonable people, and certainly they have impressive CVs, most of them, and definitely gender balance as you'd expect from the Trudeau government and whatnot. But yeah, look, I don't know. I'd like to see some business folk. But then the question is, right, if you work in the public sector, I guess the Senate is the ultimate kind of cap to your career, the ultimate appointment. Whereas in the private sector, it's not, right? So maybe it's just a self-selecting thing where, business people, would rather die than go into the Senate and be, essentially figureheads, policy rubber stampers.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been seeing some talk on social media about the Senate process, and I know Aaron, our federal director, Aaron Woodrick, has been talking about how it doesn't really matter that the process has changed a little bit under Trudeau in terms of appointing senators. It's still unelected, it's still unaccountable, and it's still useless. I mean, it still doesn't really do anything. I'm sure we're not going to have any really useful outcomes out of the Senate suddenly. But it's funny because I wonder, in terms of public opinion, I'm not sure, but I wonder if the Trudeau government has made enough small little tweaks to the system that it can say, no, now, look how qualified these people are, look how independent the process is, that maybe the Senate issue goes away. I'm not sure. It's really difficult to gauge these things from social media, especially Twitter, because it's just the Twitter chatter class, so I don't know what's real.
Exactly.
Goes away until the next Senate spending scandal.
Precisely. Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I agree. All right, well, CVG, I got to say, I was looking through your Ontario page yesterday, and you are absolutely killing it on the hydro file. I know you've launched a website, StopHighEnergyBills.ca. I see you braved the rainstorm to launch that campaign. Tell us about what's going on in Ontario with these hydro bills, and how can we motivate the public to help stop this?
Yeah, so in Ontario, it's not just hydro bills. It's starting January 1st, it's going to be your energy bills, which means not just your electricity, but also your home heating bills and your gasoline bills as well. So hydro in Ontario is absolutely out of control. Depending on how you measure it, we have had the highest rates in North America. So people who are low density, which are rural consumers of electricity, and who are using Hydro One, which is the majority-owned government now utility and transmission company, they paid the highest rates in North America at certain periods of peak use. We have had our hydro rates have gone up 60% faster than the rest of the country. There are people who it is a crisis for them. People can't afford $1,000 hydro bills. People cannot afford hydro bills that are so unpredictable. People can't afford for it to continue to climb because they're left choosing between paying for their hydro bill or being shut off in the winter, or making their mortgage payments, or buying groceries for their family. And starting January 1st, the government is bringing into effect a cap and trade carbon tax. It's going to do exactly to your home heating bills what the Wynne Liberals have done to your electricity bills, which is send them sky high. When this legislation was first introduced, the government said, "Oh, it's this kind of small crack in the door, right? Oh, it's only going to cost you a little bit." But then Justin Trudeau comes in and he says, "I want the carbon tax to be not $18 a ton. I want it to be $50 a ton within 6 years." And it's 179% increase. So this is about the kind of increase that we've seen with our hydro bills. It's going to be absolutely devastating to families here.
Insane. So Jordan, can you tell us about the the campaign? Like what are the different things that you're doing, or what have you done so far?
Yeah, so the campaign, what we've done is we've launched a website. It's www.StopHighEnergyBills.ca. You can sign our petition. Let politicians know we want them to leave our electricity bills alone. We want them to leave our home heating bills alone. We want them to leave our energy bills alone. You can order a free bumper sticker, sign our petition, and email your local MP. We have videos. All of our news coverage on this issue is available at the website. So check it out and get engaged and let politicians know that enough is enough.
Yeah, CVG, I just want to talk a little bit about this emerging, I guess the media there call it energy poverty, where it's, people are having to make these really difficult choices, like you said. I mean, I was reading somewhere that, people are switching to like barbecues and oil heat, like dangerous, like emit like far more emissions than a hydropower would have to cook food. Like, is there any relief in sight? And that's the first question. And the second question is, I was reading one of your op-eds from earlier this month, and essentially Wynne blames something called bad actors. Isn't she the worst actor of all? Like, she's the premier of the province that controls the hydro costs. I don't understand who she's trying to blame there.
Yeah, so she came out a week ago and said that Ontarians are bad actors, and essentially we need to pay a carbon tax. We need to pay more for our home heating bills. We need to pay more for our gasoline because we are so bad. Forget all of the scandals that her government has been guilty of. I mean, canceling gas plants, sending polling contracts to her own campaign manager, just really, at these $500,000 goals for the cabinet ministers for fundraising through secret events. When we're talking about bad actors, I think that this government is guilty of a lot. So then to turn around and say, to wag her finger at Ontario families and say, oh, you want to keep your family warm in the winter? You're a bad actor. Oh, you want to drive to work? Oh, you're a bad actor. Like, give me a break. It's the height of hypocrisy from this premier to blame Ontario families for wanting things that are not luxuries, right? Heating your home in Ontario, heating your home in Canada is not a luxury. Driving to work is not a luxury. Turning your lights on in your house, doing your laundry, washing your dishes, these are not luxury items. These are the basic functions of your home. It's a part of your everyday life. And to say that we are bad actors because we want to stay warm in the winter, it's so out of touch with people's lives.
Wow, that's so insulting. And I'm getting a flashback from when I covered the Ontario campaign as a reporter. And I've never covered a campaign where, and I know this does happen, but I was covering Wynne, and we took a plane to Northern Ontario and then flew back to Toronto that same day, or Ottawa, or wherever we were going. Totally not necessary, but that's like a luxury. That's sort of the political class, right? Normal people aren't doing that. Normal people are just, as you say, trying to wash their dishes, trying to heat their homes and do their laundry. And the hypocrisy, I think, I wonder if that's going to become a bigger deal in Ontario as well, just the hypocrisy of government and the activities that they are partaking in versus the average person, and the fact that government doesn't have to worry about a higher cost because of carbon taxes, because taxpayers are footing that bill for them. If they're driving around in nice SUVs, like I know that there's that clip of Wynne leaving, I think it was a carbon tax or cap and trade, whatever, press conference in a big SUV. She doesn't have to worry about the carbon tax increasing that gas bill because, of course, taxpayers are footing that gas bill for her. And I know that the hypocrisy is people are starting to get mad about it here in Alberta, and I think that they should in Ontario too.
Frankly, my concern with pointing out the hypocrisy of this government is that they'll then turn around and make us pay for it twice. So I don't know what you guys know about these carbon offsets, which are you can pay a company to go plant some trees or whatever they say they do, and there's very little regulatory oversight over what these companies actually do and are actually doing to reduce a carbon footprint, as they call it. My concern about pointing out, oh, Kathleen Wynne, your carbon footprint to fly to Paris was huge, is that she'll say, yes, you're right, Paige, it was, and the carbon tax wasn't enough, so we've spent tens of thousands of dollars on carbon offsets. And I actually have an FOI out at the moment to see how much money the government has spent on these offsets, because they do have a policy about purchasing them. Mm-hmm. I want to know how much they've spent on them so far.
Yeah, it's
like, buying a star, right? You're buying something that is intangible and doesn't really exist in the world, but they don't have to pay for it. The taxpayers do.
Yeah. BC actually had its own carbon offset scam. It was a scam called the Pacific Carbon Trust. And what they were doing is government would buy these carbon credits for $25 a ton or something like that. And then they would invest in private companies to offset theirs and pay $15 a ton. And the extra money went to staffing a big bureaucratic office and all of that. It cost about $20 million a year. Then we got the Auditor General to take a look at whether any of this stuff was actually working. It turns out the private companies were all planning to do this work anyways. They just had been contacted by the Carbon Trust saying, look, we've got some money, can we throw it your way? Meanwhile, hospitals, schools are paying this for these carbon offsets as if, hospitals are polluters that we need to be, tackling. Give me a break. And eventually we got the whole thing. It was dismantled by the BC Liberals, same government who brought it in. So if they ever do go down that path, let me know, because I can send you all sorts of interesting Auditor General documents about what a scam that whole industry is. And in fact, that industry is still reeling, and BC has never really picked itself up after that. The Auditor General pointed out how goofy it was. So.
That's interesting. It's an interesting point that you make too, Christine, because even if they're not getting into this dubious business of purchasing carbon offsets, pointing out the double standard. So I'll give you an example. In Alberta, they've got the hospitals, obviously. Hospitals are emissions intensive. I agree with you, Jordan. It doesn't mean that we should be, we need to, curb their carbon footprint. They're doing pretty important work. However, there's a hospital in Alberta that is now making the government is making some sort of green updates to it and spending all of this money on solar panels and other sort of renewable energy sources. And the problem is, it sounds so great, because really we're going to be paying the carbon tax. Taxpayers are going to be paying the carbon tax on hospitals because they are emissions intensive. So if we green these buildings, then maybe our costs will go down. Except then you think about all of the money that has to be going into greening these buildings, and the fact that that's money that's then not going towards more hospital beds, not going towards, as you say, Christine, in Ontario, would be, early treatment for autism in children, or hospital beds, or long-term care for seniors who need it. All these different priorities, cancer treatments, all the amazing things they do in hospitals. If you're greening the buildings instead, especially when you've got a big deficit like you do in Alberta, and especially like you do in Ontario, that's money that's then not going toward healthcare, which I think, needs to be the bigger picture.
Oh, I can tell you they already are planning on doing this greening of buildings. It's in their green energy plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all of that money, whether it's a school, whether it's a hospital, it sounds really nice when you say it, but when you think about the fact that there's a finite amount of public dollars and they can only be used for so much, then, that's money that's not going into care or education.
I just think this Premier doesn't think there is a finite number of dollars. I think that there's always more potential to tap the taxpayers for more and more money, and that's what she's been doing.
Christy, I know we've talked before about the green power contracts they signed, and they're overspending by something like $130 billion over 25 years to get this green power that they don't actually need.
Yeah.
We have seen governments in the past rip up union contracts, for example, that were sweetheart deals. BC's in the Supreme Court right now arguing that they were allowed to do that. Is there any thought given to ripping up these contracts, or somehow buying them out, or dissolving them to try to save some money?
So I don't know if it would cost more to buy us out of the contracts or to stay in them and overproduce power that we don't need and sell it at a loss. We should do whichever one is less expensive.
Yeah.
But I know that there are contracts that are in default. So we could get out of those contracts and renegotiate them. There are contracts that have lapsed, or we could get out of those as well. And we could also stop signing new contracts. They actually recently did suspend large and renewable procurement for wind power. I believe there is an ongoing procurement for solar that could at this stage still be stopped. We should do that. But the wind power contract was suspended. It wasn't canceled. It should be canceled, not just suspended. We don't need it. With a suspension, there's the potential to bring it back, which we absolutely don't need. There's other things we could do to save some money, like stop spending money on conservation programs when we are over producing power, to spend millions of dollars on conservation programs. We don't actually need conservation programs in this province. People are voluntarily conserving power because it is too expensive. So to spend money on these conservation programs, it's really good money after bad. They should stop that immediately.
Yeah. Hey, one last point here is, I mean, Wynn's made many bad decisions on this, but she did inherit some of this from McGuinty, who I noticed from one of your pieces once promised that by 2015 price increases would slow down on hydropower. I think we once tortured Dalton McGuinty with our Fibber the Pinocchio lookalike after he broke his no tax policy. These are pretty bold-faced lies that they must have known at the time were never going to come out. I mean, who on earth thinks that hydro prices aren't going to go up?
At this point, they are going to continue to go up. The things that I just named, the suspending those contracts and stopping spending on conservation, that would do a little bit, but it won't do enough to stop rates from climbing. There's been over a decade of terrible decision and real deep intervention in the market by politicians. So it's going to continue to go up, and I'm skeptical if even the next government will be able to solve this problem because it's so deep-seated. But there's things we could do to stop wasting money, like we could cancel that cap-and-trade carbon tax. We could cancel the new procurement. But yeah, I think in the short term, at least, we know rates are going to continue to climb, and it's a terrifying thing to wait for your hydro bill and see what the shock is going to be this month.
Yeah.
Well, maybe let's give you the opportunity. Can you give people the website, and are there materials that they can get from the website? Is there anything like that people should be aware of?
Yeah, absolutely. I would recommend that everybody go to StopHighEnergyBills.ca. It's a great resource. You can learn a lot about what has happened in Ontario and what you can do. And some of the things that you can do are sign our petition, join our movement, share some of our videos, share some of our articles. You can order free stickers. You can write to the leaders of the parties and to your own MPP and let them know that you want the waste to stop.
Very cool. Yeah, it's a really nifty website too. Like, it's very user friendly and cool. People should definitely go there.
Yeah, and free stickers. Who doesn't like free stickers?
Yeah, it's nice. And I see as of right now, 5,599 people have signed the petition, and I'm killing myself laughing at this. So that's a great little image of a Kathleen Wynne pouring money out of a gas hose. That's like that. That's good. It's worth it just to go see that.
Just to see that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Paige, you got a waste of the week for us?
I do. So we have this bridge in Calgary called the Peace Bridge. You may remember it is the gift that keeps on giving if you enjoy government waste. So the newest update to this Peace Bridge, which at the time when it was built cost $24.5 million, and it was 16 months behind schedule when it was initially built. because the bolts that they had on it had to be rewelded. So really poor planning, kind of right from the outset. It was foreign designed. It's near other bridges. It was like kind of dubious as to why would we even need a bridge there? And it's also just, it's not only a pedestrian footbridge, it's a real vanity project. But poor planning went into it from the beginning. So now we see that taxpayers are again the victim of poor planning when it comes to this Peace Bridge in Calgary. They're having to replace all of the light fixtures. So the light bulbs that they had initially put in obviously were not designed to be outdoors in Calgary winters, which is, you know, it's a bridge, so it's got to be outdoor in Calgary winters. But obviously that planning was not put into it, that foresight. So now we're spending $700,000 to put 300 lights on the bridge. And they're LED lights, and the government says they're going to last a really long time, which is great. I'm glad that it sounds like there's a little bit more foresight, but I think there's reason to be skeptical. It's over $2,300 a light to replace the lights in this bridge. It's insane. And like I said, there was the $24.5 million price tag when it first was built. Recently, there was cracked glass on the bridge. It's not super sustainable, so there was a $200,000 bill for that. And the city was going to try and spend $400,000 to add another crosswalk to try and curb jaywalking to get to this bridge. There is just thing after thing after thing after thing with the Peace Bridge. And the new thing is another $700,000. And we'll see if the price tag actually runs any higher than that.
Only government could find a $2,300 light bulb.
It's crazy. I mean, at least I guess they're built to be withholding or, you know, staying afloat during Calgary winters. But why you wouldn't have these light bulbs in the first place that can withstand Calgary winters is beyond me.
It reminds me of my favorite Teddy nominee from last year, which was the Saskatoon parking meters that were solar powered and then didn't work when the snow fell, and that kind of the classic Canadian issue, right? Like, smarten up, people. We live in Canada.
Yeah, like, hey, we have winter.
Yeah.
When you design things for outdoors, make sure that they can withstand the winter. And that's sort of the problem, I think, with these projects that they're not just utility. Like, I'm fine. I don't want to live in the Soviet country where everything's ugly and just utilitarian. But this was mostly a vanity project, right? It wasn't necessary to have a bridge. And certainly it serves a purpose to be a footbridge, but it's mostly a vanity project. It's all modern looking. And so maybe they could try to, when they're doing these big, expensive $25 million vanity projects, now obviously like a $30 million vanity project, they could try to think about utility a little bit. People, you might need to be lit during the winter. It's my normal thought. So anyway, that's the waste of the week.
Fair enough. That's a good one. That's the possible Teddy nominee there. Well, that's it for this episode of Tax Talk from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Be sure to follow us all on Twitter at Paige McPhee, at Jordan Bateman, at C Van Geyn. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, please subscribe and give us a good rating. Now, we're going on hiatus for November because Paige and I are so busy traveling. I'm going to Wisconsin next week. Then it's Remembrance Day. Then Paige is away on assignment for a couple weeks. Oh, Paige, you're also going to the Yukon. You should mention that too.
Yes, I'm going to the Yukon. I'm speaking to the Yukon Chamber of Commerce on November 3rd. And people can go, if you go to the Yukon Chamber of Commerce website, then you'll see the event posted right there. We're sort of having a little debate on carbon taxes. I'm going to talk about why carbon taxes are a really bad idea for Canada's north, and Yukon in particular, and how they've been playing out across the country. And then an engineer who is pro-carbon tax is going to give his perspective. Then they're bringing on representatives from each of the four political parties, because I guess the carbon tax is an issue in the election that's upcoming there. So I think it's going to be a really cool event, and I'm definitely excited to go up to Yukon. So if anybody who's watching this is in the area, then certainly go check it out. And if you happen to be a CTF supporter as well, we're going to have a social for our supporters in Yukon following that event. So people can email me if they want more details. It's pmcpherson@taxpayer.com.
It's awesome to go to the Yukon because it continues to expand our reach as a truly pan-Canadian organization.
Exactly. I think I'm going to use that word just so that maybe I'll try to record it and then I'll send it to you.
Pan-Canadian. It can be your...
on repeat for you.
Or Textler. It could be a Texler. Whenever I get a text from Paige, it'll say Pan-Canadian. You can also check out our website at taxpayer.com. All right, we'll be back next month, in December with another Tax Talk. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.